In 1695, 6 nuns from the Convent of the Holy Trinity in San Luis Potosí were found dead under inexplicable circumstances over a span of exactly 61 days. None of them showed signs of violence, only a tiny mark on the neck, resembling the bite of an insect. What was most disturbing was not only that they died one by one, but that 3 of them perished in the presence of witnesses who swore they had seen nothing. The Church ordered all documents related to these events sealed until 1850, when a fire destroyed the diocesan archive. Yet, I have uncovered the hidden diary of the sole survivor who knew the truth, and what it reveals about those days of terror forever changes what we thought we knew about this case. Before continuing with the cursed story of this convent, I invite you to become part of our community of seekers of hidden mysteries. Subscribe now, ring the bell, and let me know in the comments from which country or city you are listening to this forbidden tale. Few channels dare to tell the truths we reveal here. You will be one of the privileged few who will learn the fate of these 6 nuns and the secret behind their mysterious deaths. San Luis Potosí, 1695. The city thrived thanks to the silver mines, attracting ambitious Spaniards and creating a society divided between wealth and misery. About 5 miles from the city, surrounded by mountains, stood the Convent of the Holy Trinity, a gray stone structure with a small bell tower that seemed to watch over the barren, rugged landscape. The convent had been founded only 30 years earlier by a contemplative order seeking isolation to devote themselves entirely to prayer. Its location was no coincidence. It was built upon the ruins of an ancient Huachical temple, making use of pre-existing walls and underground cisterns that collected the scarce rainwater of the region. The community of about 21 nuns lived under the strict rule of Mother Teresa de Jesus Coronado, a 60-year-old woman with sharp features and penetrating eyes. She was known both for her unbending discipline and her vast knowledge of medicinal herbs. Daily life followed a rigid routine, beginning at 4 a.m. with matins and unfolding through a succession of prayers, work, and brief rest periods until Compline, the final prayer before the sisters retired to their cells at dusk. Among the nuns, one stood out, Sister Remedios, 45 years old, who had joined the convent 2 decades earlier after the death of her father, a Spanish physician. From him, she had inherited not only anatomical knowledge but also his medical library, which made her the convent's nurse. Her round face and warm hands inspired immediate trust, and when illness struck, she always appeared with herbal teas, ointments, and words of comfort. The younger sisters, like Carmen and Esperanza, took on the hardest tasks, scrubbing the stone floors, washing clothes, and working in the garden that supplied vegetables for the community. The elderly, like Augustina, who was 78, were allowed to devote themselves solely to prayer and less demanding work such as embroidery or manuscript copying. That October of 1695 began with unusual rains that turned the normally arid landscape green. At first, the constant sound of rain was comforting, but after days without end, it became oppressive. The muddy roads cut off access to the convent, heightening the feeling of isolation. It was in this atmosphere that Fray Miguel de Orduna, the community's confessor, arrived for his monthly visit. A Dominican friar of 50 with a thick beard already turning white, he usually brought joy to the nuns with news from the outside world and goods difficult to obtain. But this time, his face showed concern. "Mother," he said to the superior during their frugal supper, "I have brought the medicines you requested, but I fear the city is not well. Strange cases have appeared that no doctor can identify. Weakness, cold sweats, and most peculiar of all, small marks on the body like insect bites. They die within hours, and nothing can be done." Mother Teresa frowned. "What symptoms exactly?" Fray Miguel lowered his voice. "They weaken quickly, suffer chills, and then they are gone." "God protect us," whispered the superior, crossing herself. "We must intensify our prayers. And perhaps," she hesitated, Perhaps we should limit visits to the convent for a time. Miguel nodded gravely. A prudent measure. I've already instructed the porter not to allow entry until further notice. Neither of them could imagine that the evil they feared had already slipped inside the convent walls, waiting patiently to reveal itself. October 10th, 1695. The morning began with a thick fog that wrapped the convent like a shroud. The bells rang for matins as usual, but when the nuns gathered in the chapel, they noticed the absence of Sister Carmen, a 19-year-old novice known for her punctuality. Sister Dolores, whose duty was to wake the tardy, was sent to fetch her. Minutes later, a piercing scream shattered the dawn's silence. The sisters rushed to the side chapel dedicated to the Virgin of Sorrows, where they found Sister Dolores kneeling beside Carmen's lifeless body. The young novice lay before the altar, arms crossed on her chest, her face serene as if she had merely fallen asleep in prayer. Only one detail disturbed the image of peace: a tiny reddish mark on the right side of her neck, barely visible beneath her habit. "She's cold," whispered Dolores, while Mother Teresa touched the girl's forehead. Sister Remedios arrived swiftly, gently pushing aside the gathering nuns. She examined the body with the practiced precision of one accustomed to dealing with death. "She has been gone for several hours," she finally declared. "Perhaps she came here to pray during the night and suffered some sudden attack." "And this mark?" asked Mother Teresa, pointing to the small red dot. Remedios studied it, frowning. "It could be an insect bite, strange for this time of year, but perhaps a spider seeking refuge from the rains. A bite like that could kill." Sister Esperanza, Carmen's close friend, trembled. So quickly. If the creature was venomous and she had some weakness in her constitution, yes, it's possible, Remedios explained, laying a consoling hand on the girl's shoulder. "It would have been swift, without suffering." Fray Miguel entered, alarmed by the commotion, and froze at the sight. He knelt to administer the last rites. "We must notify the authorities," he said afterward. "The roads are impassable," Mother Teresa replied. "And if it truly was an insect bite, there is no crime to investigate. We will bury her in our cemetery, as is our custom." That same afternoon, under relentless rain, Carmen was laid to rest. The sisters lingered at her grave long after the final prayer, none wanting to be the first to abandon her in the wet earth. That night, the convent sank into a silence deeper than usual. Few could sleep. Death, so often an abstract meditation, had materialized in the form of a girl who only yesterday sang sweetly at Vespers. What none of them knew was that Carmen's death was only the beginning. 8 days after Sister Carmen's burial, the convent tried to return to its routine. The rains had finally ceased, leaving behind a clean, fresh air that seemed almost eager to sweep away the sadness lingering in the hearts of the nuns. Sister Esperanza, still visibly shaken by the loss of her closest friend, asked Mother Teresa for permission to work in the garden. Physical labor, the feel of the soil between her hands, it had always been her way of praying, as valid for her as reciting the Psalms. That morning, while pulling weeds that had flourished during the rains, Esperanza froze. Half hidden among the tomato plants was a small wooden cross, roughly carved, with a single name scratched into it: Carmen. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She had never seen it before, and none of the sisters had mentioned such an object. Determined to show it to the Mother Superior, she hurried toward the refectory where the community was gathering for the midday meal. The long hall with its darkened wooden tables and backless benches filled with the murmur of sisters taking their places. But Esperanza never arrived. When the bell rang to begin the meal, her seat was empty. Noticing her absence, Mother Teresa sent Sister Mercedes to fetch her. Minutes later, a shrill scream pierced the convent's silence. In the corridor leading to the refectory, Esperanza lay sprawled on the ground, eyes fixed blankly on the vaulted ceiling. In her right hand, she still clutched the little wooden cross. And on her neck, at the very same spot as Carmen's, was the tiny reddish mark. Panic spread through the sisters like wildfire across dry fields. This time it could not be an accident, nor a coincidence. Two identical deaths in just 8 days defied all natural explanation. "We must leave this convent," cried young Sister Beatrice, her voice broken with fear. "Something evil is here within these walls. No one will abandon this sacred place," declared Mother Teresa firmly. "We are under God's protection. We will intensify our prayers and take precautions." Fray Miguel, still at the convent because the muddy roads delayed his departure, agreed with the superior outwardly, but his face betrayed the worry he struggled to hide. "From now on," Mother Teresa continued, "no one will go anywhere alone. We will move only in groups of at least 3 sisters." That same afternoon, while preparing Esperanza's body for burial, Sister Remedios noticed something that had been overlooked in the initial chaos: a small prayer book tucked into the folds of the dead nun's habit. Opening it, she found several pages marked with strange symbols drawn in the margins. These were not random doodles. They seemed purposeful, like a sequence. On the last marked page, a trembling hand had written a chilling note. "She watches me as I sleep. I feel her eyes. I know I will be next." Remedios quickly closed the book and hid it among her own belongings. That night, while the other nuns tried to sleep, she lit a candle in her cell and studied the marked pages carefully. The symbols did not belong to any system she knew, but they looked oddly familiar, like distorted versions of the ancient runes she had once seen in her father's medical texts. What had Carmen and Esperanza discovered, and why had they paid for that knowledge with their lives? Meanwhile, in her own cell, Mother Teresa unlocked a small chest and pulled out an old manuscript. Its yellowed pages were filled with anatomical drawings and Latin text. One passage caught her attention. "Venom of the spiders in the Silver Mountains region is extremely potent. Just a few drops bring death swiftly, leaving almost no visible mark." With trembling hands, the superior closed the manuscript and locked it away again. Then she knelt before the crucifix in her austere room and prayed fervently, not only for the souls of the departed, but also for the strength to face what she feared was yet to come. In another cell, the elderly Sister Augustina, the convent's oldest at 78, awoke with a start. In the half-light of her chamber, she thought she saw a figure standing motionless beside her bed. For a long, eternal moment, she held her breath in terror, until her eyes adjusted and she realized it was only her own habit hanging on a hook. Yet the feeling of not being alone lingered. As she tried to sleep again, an old memory rose from the depths of her mind. The tale told by watchical elders when she was a child, about the temple that once stood on this land. A temple where sacrifices were made to appease the goddess of death. "She chooses her victims one by one," the old women had whispered, "and she always begins with the youngest, for their blood is the sweetest." All Saints' Day dawned with a clear sky, cruelly at odds with the mood inside the convent of the Holy Trinity. The nuns prepared for the solemn celebration, though this year it carried a weight of grief. 2 empty seats in the choir stood as painful reminders of their recent losses. Following Mother Teresa's instructions, the sisters moved only in groups, even for the simplest tasks like gathering vegetables from the garden or feeding the hens. Fear hovered in every corner of the convent, manifesting in nervous glances and startled jumps at the slightest sound. That afternoon, Sisters Dolores, Catalina, and Beatrice were assigned to decorate the altar with wildflowers in honor of the departed. As they worked in silence, Catalina noticed something strange on one of the silver candelabra. "Look at this," she said, pointing to tiny marks etched into its base. "It seems like writing, but it's neither Latin nor Spanish." The others leaned closer. Indeed, small symbols formed a circular pattern around the candelabram's base. Dolores frowned. "I recognize some of these. They resemble the sacred symbols used by the indigenous Huachicals. My father, a royal official, had documents with these characters. He said they were part of rituals only the watchful priests performed. "Then why," asked Beatrice with a trembling voice, "do we find pagan writing on a sacred object of our convent? Perhaps it was made from silver taken from objects belonging to the temple that once stood here," Dolores reasoned. "We should tell Mother Teresa," suggested Catalina. But before they could, the bell called for vespers, and they hurried off to join the community in prayer. That night, after supper, Dolores requested permission to visit the graves of Carmen and Esperanza. Though hesitant, Mother Teresa eventually agreed, provided Catalina and Beatrice accompanied her. The convent's small cemetery lay behind the building, encircled by a low stone wall. Simple wooden crosses marked the graves, each bearing the name of the departed. The full moon illuminated the path, casting long, shifting shadows across the ground. The three nuns knelt to pray. As they did, Beatrice suddenly noticed movement among the shadows. "Who's there?" she called sharply, standing. There was no reply, only the whisper of the wind through the cypress trees. "An animal, perhaps," Catalina said, though her tone betrayed little conviction. The uneasy silence stretched as they prayed. When at last they rose to leave, Dolores gasped in horror. On Carmen's grave, someone had placed a small carved figure, a wooden spider, its 8 legs stretched out with lifelike detail. "We must leave now," whispered Catalina, tugging at her companion's sleeves. But it was too late. A thick, low fog began to gather around the cemetery, creeping forward with a will of its own. The air grew suddenly cold, heavy in their lungs. "I can't move," murmured Beatrice, her voice faint. Dolores felt a sharp sting at her neck, brief but piercing, like the strike of a wasp. She tried to lift her hand, but her arms felt impossibly heavy. Her vision blurred, and the last thing she saw was Catalina's horrified face. The next morning, when the bells rang for lauds, Dolores did not appear. Alarmed, Mother Teresa ordered an immediate search. Catalina and Beatrice, pale and trembling, led her to the cemetery. There, lying on Carmen's grave as if she had fallen asleep in prayer, was Sister Dolores. Her face bore the same serene expression as the others, and on her neck, in the exact same place, was the now familiar red mark. "We were right beside her," Beatrice sobbed. "We saw nothing. We heard nothing. One moment she was praying with us, and the next." Mother Teresa studied the two women closely. Their story didn't fit, yet she could not see how. "And what of the fog, and the wooden spider you mentioned?" she pressed. Catalina pointed at the grave, but the fog had vanished, and the carved figure was gone. Only Dolores's lifeless body bore silent witness to what had happened. Fray Miguel, preparing to depart with the improving weather, halted his plans once more. A third death, despite all their precautions, made it clear the threat was far greater than they had imagined. "We must investigate thoroughly," he said grimly during an urgent meeting with Mother Teresa and Sister Remedios. 3 identical deaths cannot be coincidence, nor nature's work alone. Mother Teresa hesitated, unable to speak the thought aloud. "Are you suggesting someone inside the convent?" "I do not know, Mother," replied the priest gravely. "But we must consider every possibility, no matter how painful." That afternoon, while preparing Dolores's body, Sister Remedios performed a more careful examination than before. Using a magnifying glass inherited from her father, she inspected the mark on the nun's neck. Her breath caught. This was no insect bite. It was a puncture, as from a fine needle. The revelation changed everything. These were no accidents. Someone was deliberately ending the lives of the sisters, one by one. But who? And why? 15 days passed after Dolores's death, and the convent of the Holy Trinity had become unrecognizable. The silence of contemplation that once defined it was replaced by a silence heavy with fear and suspicion. The nuns spoke little, wary that even words might be twisted or misunderstood. Mother Teresa enforced stricter rules. No nun could ever be out of sight of at least two others, even during the night. The sisters abandoned their individual cells and now slept in the refectory in groups, taking turns to keep vigil. Fray Miguel, unable to leave under such circumstances, wrote to the Bishop of San Luis Potosí, pleading for instructions and perhaps for intervention. But the days dragged on with no reply. The sense of isolation deepened. One morning, Sisters Mercedes, Beatriz, and Augustina were assigned to sort books in the convent library. Normally a pleasant task, now it was carried out mechanically, without thought. Mercedes, a woman of 30 with keen intelligence, had once taught novices before the tragedies overturned their routine. While leafing through an old volume of saints' lives, she found a folded paper hidden inside. It was a drawing, a map of the convent. Several areas were marked with the same strange symbols carved into the candelabrum they had discovered days earlier. "Look at this," she whispered, showing it to her companions. Augustina, adjusting her spectacles, studied the sketch carefully. Her aged face seemed to grow older still as recognition dawned. "This is a ritual map," she murmured. "My father was an archaeologist. He studied the Huachical. These symbols mark places of power, sites where the veil between worlds is thin." "And what does that mean?" Beatrice asked, her voice little more than a whisper. "It means that whoever drew this believed contact with the other side could be made at these exact points in the convent." The three nuns looked again at the map. 6 locations were precisely marked: the side chapel, the refectory hall, the rear garden, the library, the kitchen, and the bell tower. The first 3 matched the places where the bodies of Carmen, Esperanza, and Dolores had been found. "My God," breathed Mercedes. "We were in one of those places just this morning." Before they could speak further, the door creaked open. All 3 jumped, only to see Sister Remedios, smiling warmly. "Forgive me for startling you," she said gently. "Mother Teresa sent me to call you. It is time for the community reading." Mercedes hesitated, then quickly folded the map and hid it in her habit. Something deep within told her not to share this discovery, at least not yet. After the reading, Mercedes quietly approached Fray Miguel. "Father, I need to speak to you in private." Later, in the sacristy, she revealed the map. The priest studied it grimly. "The most troubling thing," Mercedes continued, "is that 3 of these marked places match exactly where our sisters were found. And according to this," Miguel said slowly, "the next place would be the library." Before they could warn Mother Teresa, a scream shattered the convent. The sisters rushed toward the library. There, kneeling and sobbing, was Beatrice. At a reading desk lay a nun slumped forward, head resting on an open book, as if she had fallen asleep. But when Mercedes entered behind the others, her blood ran cold. She was alive, standing by the doorway. So who was the body at the desk? Fray Miguel approached with trembling hands. Gently, he turned the face of the deceased. It was Sister Augustina, the oldest nun in the convent. Her face was calm, peaceful, yet on her neck was the same small red mark. "Impossible," Mercedes whispered. "She was just with us." "No," interrupted Remedios firmly. "After the Angelus, she left us, saying she wanted to consult something in the library." Mercedes faltered. Had she imagined Augustina walking with them earlier? Was fear distorting her memory? Miguel quietly pulled out the map again. 4 of the 6 marked sites now matched deaths. Only 2 remained, the kitchen and the bell tower. "We must evacuate the convent immediately," he declared with authority. "We cannot wait until tomorrow." Mother Teresa, pale but resolute, agreed. "Gather everyone in the main courtyard. We will leave before nightfall." As the sisters prepared to leave, Mercedes approached Miguel with a shiver. "Father, if the killer is following the map's order, why kill Augustina before me? I was in the library too." "Perhaps," the priest said grimly. "The map marks not places, but people. The locations may simply be where the murderer found the chance to strike. As the convent prepared for evacuation, the air was tense with fear. The sisters hurried through the courtyard, collecting only what was essential: habits, devotional objects, and important documents. No one wanted to spend another moment inside those walls that had become a trap of death. Mother Teresa supervised with outward calm, though the rapid motion of her fingers on the rosary betrayed her inner strain. Beside her, Fray Miguel silently reviewed the recent events, searching for a clue they might have missed. All the victims, he murmured to the superior, were found alone, despite our precautions. That suggests the killer is someone they trusted enough to be alone with. Or someone. Father, Mother Teresa replied gravely. Are you suggesting one of us? Miguel hesitated. I don't want to believe it, but we must consider all possibilities. Suddenly, a scream rang out from the kitchen. They ran. The broad stone room, dim despite the day, was sealed with shutters. In the middle of the floor stood Sister Beatriz, frozen in horror, staring at the lifeless form sprawled beside the great hearth. It was Sister Catalina. Her face, like all the others, was serene, her body arranged as though in prayer. And on her neck gleamed the mark. But this time, there was more. Beside her right hand lay a small glass vial, and not far from it, a fine sewing needle, gleaming faintly in the candlelight. She was preparing an infusion. Beatrice stammered, breaking out of her shock. She asked me to fetch dried herbs from the pantry. When I came back, she was like this. Miguel bent down, carefully picking up the vial with a cloth. Inside was a clear, viscous liquid. I believe we've found the murder weapon, he said darkly. Mother Teresa's face went pale. Everyone to the courtyard, she ordered. Now, no one stays behind, not for an instant. On the way back, Mercedes whispered urgently to Miguel. Father, according to the map, only one place remains, the bell tower, and the sun will set in less than 2 hours. The priest nodded grimly. The bell tower, isolated, narrow, reached only by a spiral stair, was the perfect place for a final killing. No one must be allowed up there, he said. But when they arrived at the courtyard, confusion reigned. The nuns should have been gathering in groups for evacuation, but instead, they ran about in panic. What's happening? Mother Teresa demanded of a novice. It's Sister Remedios, Mother, the girl stammered. We can't find her anywhere. A chill ran down Miguel's spine. The pieces began to align. Someone with medical knowledge. Someone every nun trusted. Someone always present when bodies were discovered. The bell tower, he muttered. She'll be in the bell tower. Without waiting, he sprinted toward the tower stairs, followed closely by Mother Teresa and Mercedes. The spiral staircase wound upward endlessly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. At the top, they heard it, a low, rhythmic murmur, like a prayer in an unknown tongue, mingled with the soft chime of metal. They burst into the chamber of the bells. There, kneeling before a small, improvised altar, was Sister Remedios. In one hand, she held a vial identical to the one found near Catalina. In the other, a long, fine needle glimmered in the blood-red light of sunset. On the altar were 6 small rag dolls, each wearing a scrap of cloth cut from the habits of the dead nuns. Before each doll burned a black candle. In the center, a clay bowl held a dark liquid that gave off a faint vapor. Remedios, cried Mother Teresa, her voice trembling but firm. What does this mean? The nurse turned slowly. Her warm, motherly face was transformed, strange, wild, her eyes dark and bottomless. You've come just in time, she said in a low, unfamiliar voice, to witness the culmination of my work. Why, sister? Miguel pleaded, stepping cautiously forward. Why kill them? Remedios gave a sad smile. Do you know what stood here before this convent? A temple. For centuries, my people worshipped our gods here. My mother was a priestess, and her mother before her. When the Spaniards came, they destroyed it, slaughtered the priests. My mother was buried alive beneath the altar stones. I was 10 years old. That's impossible, Mother Teresa whispered. That was over a century ago. Remedios laughed, a sound without joy. Not I, perhaps, but her blood flows in me. Her memories, her hatred. For generations, my family has waited for vengeance. She rose, still holding the vial and needle. 6 deaths, 6 sacred places, 6 lunar cycles. A ritual to shatter the veil between worlds. And tonight, at sunset, the final seal will break. The great bronze bells loomed above them, motionless yet resonant with the echo of centuries. The last rays of the sun filtered through the narrow windows, painting everything in crimson light. Sister Remedios stood before her altar, her shadow stretching monstrously against the stone walls. In her hand gleamed the needle, thin as a spider's fang. You must not do this, Fray Miguel said firmly, raising his crucifix. You are desecrating this holy house. Remedios's laughter filled the chamber, eerie and hollow. This house was desecrated long before. You built your convent on our temple. You prayed to your God over the bones of ours. Tonight, the old gods return. She advanced, her eyes blazing. Mercedes and Mother Teresa shrank back, but Miguel stood his ground. Whatever hatred consumes you is not your mother's, nor your ancestors', he said. It is the devil's. Cast it aside before it damns your soul forever. For a moment, her face softened, as though the words had pierced some hidden place. But then, with sudden fury, she lunged. Miguel barely dodged the needle as it flashed past his face. The vial spilled, dark liquid splattering across the stones. At once, the candles flickered violently, as if some unseen force stirred in rage. Mercedes darted forward, knocking the clay bowl from the altar. It shattered, and the foul-smelling liquid hissed as it seeped into the cracks of the floor. No! Remedios screamed, her voice inhuman. She struck Mercedes across the face, sending her sprawling. In that instant, Mother Teresa seized the rope of the great bell. With all her strength, she pulled. The bronze heart thundered once, twice, 3 times. The deafening toll filled the chamber, reverberating through stone and bone alike. The black candles guttered out. The rag dolls collapsed, lifeless fabric once more. Remedios staggered, clutching her head. "Stop it," she shrieked. "You'll break the seal." But the 4th toll came, louder than thunder. The tower itself seemed to shudder. Remedios screamed, dropping the needle. She lurched toward the window, as if fleeing the sound. Miguel reached for her arm. Too late. With a final cry that was neither wholly human nor wholly beast, she hurled herself through the narrow opening. For a heartbeat, her figure was framed against the blood-red sky. Then she fell, vanishing into the shadows of the courtyard below. The bell's echoes died slowly, leaving only silence. The sisters, trembling, gathered around the shattered altar. Nothing remained of the ritual but broken wax and spilled ash. Mother Teresa sank to her knees. May God have mercy on her soul. Miguel made the sign of the cross. The devil claimed her long before she fell. But her evil is ended now. The following morning, the bishop's envoys arrived at last. They found a convent half empty, its survivors exhausted, their faces lined with grief. 6 nuns lay buried, their deaths forever etched into the memory of the community. The bell tower window was sealed with stone. The broken altar was dismantled, its remnants burned. And the diary of Sister Mercedes, where she wrote down every detail of those 61 days, was locked away in the diocesan archives, until it was lost in the fire of 1850. What endures are the whispers of 6 nuns taken one by one, of a ritual never completed, and of the bells that still, on stormy nights, ring by themselves, echoes of a curse that once nearly opened the gates of the underworld.